What is up, guys? Marcellus Williams, aka TheSwolefessor, here to educate you on health, fitness, social well-being. And today, guys, we're going to be talking about concentric and eccentric reps. So let's get right into it. For those of you who don't know, most lifts involve a concentric and eccentric portion of the lift. The concentric portion of the lift is the positive portion of the lift, where you're pretty much working against gravity. So for example, on a bench press or a squat, when you're coming up, boom, what people tend to consider to be like the contraction of the muscle, that's gonna be the concentric portion of the lift. The eccentric portion of the lift is the negative portion of the lift, or when you're coming down and usually letting the muscle stretch. For example, our chest is stretching out when we're coming down on a bench press, or the way that our quads will stretch as we go down the squat. And basically, a lot of you who decide, who watch my video over if you need to squeeze the muscle and make it grow and what that actually means, who also checked out my videos over tempo and time retention, things like that, have been asking all kinds of questions about okay, but shouldn't I still go really slow on the eccentric portion of the lift? Shouldn't I make sure that it's nice and controlled? Or isn't there a benefit then if I go slow on the concentric and slow on the eccentric, because isn't that also a form of progressive overload? Because people have this idea that because they're doing the work slower, that it's somehow stimulating more muscle growth. And that's just, and I understand that train of thought. That's actually one of the few misconceptions that, okay, I can kind of see where you're going with that, guys. But that's not the case, because you have to think about it. You're still doing the same amount of work. You're doing it slower, but it's still the same amount of work. Remember, when we think about progressive overload, we're thinking about doing more total work than what we did last time. So we have to increase or decrease a certain parameter. So we know that our volume is made up of our sets times our reps times our weight. So progressive overload would mean we're increasing some aspect of that. Or if we're looking at it from rest time, decreasing an aspect of that. But the reality is, with just going slower on the eccentric and the concentric, the reality is that you're still doing the same total work. So you're not really progressively overloading. So let's get into it. First of all, the reality is, in almost most 99% of cases, you want to do both. You want to do both the concentric and the concentric and eccentric portion of the lift. Why? Because it's more total work. It's more time under tension. As I've explained what that term actually means, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going 10 seconds down, going down a curl. It simply means that you're going through the full range of motion, coming all the way up and all the way down. Why? Because obviously, if I just do the concentric portion of the lift, that's not as much time under tension as coming up and down, right? That's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. That's what time under tension is. We're going all the way up and all the way down. So the reality is, the reason that those two are so beneficial when put together is because you're making your muscle do more total work. It takes more work to lift 200 pounds and then lower it than it does to simply lift it or to just lower it, doing it together. So that's why you're gonna get results faster doing both together. With that being said, you can maximize your hypertrophy doing just one or the other. It'll just take longer, but that is true. If somebody comes in and let's say just do concentric, concentric reps only, or somebody comes in, they just do negatives, eccentric reps only, they can still maximize hypertrophy. Now, a lot of people don't understand how that is, because they're doesn't it take, contractions? Don't you have to contract the muscle? Doesn't it have to work for it to grow? But what you have to understand is that they're both contractions. The concentric is what you would call a positive contraction, and the eccentric is a negative contraction. Because people have to understand, when most people think about contractions, they just think about it oh, bicep stretch, bicep contracted. But really, we have to look at a deeper level physiologically and look at how muscle fibers work. Because the reality is, when you're doing this, your muscle fibers are contracting, but when you're doing this as well, there's still contracting going on. Why? Well, because you're having to control the weight as you're lowering it. So our muscle fibers are still pulling against each other in a way that is contracting. It's just in the opposite direction. So you can think of concentric as contracting in this way, whereas eccentric could be contracting in this way. But there's still contraction with both of those, which is why you're able to maximize hypertrophy using either or. You're not gonna get it, you're not gonna maximize, for example, you're not gonna maximize hypertrophy in your chest as fast doing just concentric or just eccentric as you would if you did both together. Why? Because it's gonna take you long. You're gonna have to do double the concentric work or double the eccentric work essentially to get the same amount of volume that you would get just doing it all together at once. With that being said, a lot of misconceptions are, once again, let's be very clear. There is no benefit to going slow on the concentric portion of the rep. You can look at all the research behind it. There's no benefit. We found no difference in muscle growth between coming up, slow like this versus being explosive. Now, you want to control it. That's a misconception. A lot of people equate going slow with being controlled, but you can be explosive and still have control. I'm sure plenty of you have seen the difference between someone like a powerlifter who bench presses, right? Comes down and they explode up, but they have control, versus someone who's just kind of going crazy with it. They're not really controlling the concentric or the eccentric. but there's no benefit to slowing that down. You want to be explosive in the concentric. If anything, you're going to get more benefit from being explosive because if you go slow, it can maybe be kind of hard to lock that out and get that full contraction on the chest. But if you really explode up, boom, full contraction on the chest comes really easy. Versus coming kind of slow, it might be a little bit hard to kind of get that explosiveness versus boom, contraction in the chest. So that's something that you guys want to consider and keep in mind. Now with the eccentric, because this is where a lot of your questions come from. People are trying to say, well, I've seen research and studies where the eccentric portion of the lift seems to stimulate more overall muscle growth than the concentric when they compare the two. So if somebody just does concentric versus eccentric, the eccentric seems to stimulate more muscle growth. So isn't that because that's the portion where you're going down nice, slow, and controlled? And yes, you do want to have control when you do it, but the reality is, once again, all the research has shown us coming down nice and controlled, like say 1, 2, stimulates the same amount of hypertrophy as coming down slow and controlled. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's no difference. We found no difference between those two. As long as you have a controlled eccentric, meaning you're not just dropping the weight, but you're controlling it, you're getting all the same benefits regardless if you do it in 2 seconds or 4 seconds. The reason that we seem to see more higher levels of elevated protein synthesis with eccentric versus concentric is because you guys have to think about it. I'll give you an example. Somebody sent me a study saying, hey, look, these guys did eccentric only, these guys did concentric only, and the people who did eccentric only got more overall, stimulated more muscle hypertrophy. So isn't the eccentric more important? But what you have to look at and understand is that in this study, they each did 20% of their max, but 20% of the max based off what category they're in, meaning the people in the concentric group did 20% of the most that they could lift on the concentric portion of the movement. The group in the eccentric did 20% of the most they could handle lowering on the eccentric portion of the movement. As you guys know, the concentric portion is harder. You're always going to be able to do more weight on the eccentric than the concentric. So it makes more sense, right? If you're doing more weight, let's say I'm doing 3 sets of 10 concentric, and I can do that with 200 pounds versus 3 sets of 10 eccentric with 250 pounds, sets times reps times weight, who's doing more total work? So of course, in that case, you're gonna see more growth as far as the eccentric and the concentric, but that's it. There's nothing special about the eccentric that just magically produces more total muscle growth, in the sense that if we were to have the exact same weight with concentric and eccentric, you find that that gap of elevated protein synthesis isn't there anymore. It's not, at least not to the exact same degree, and different factors go into it. But it's just understanding that if you choose to try to maximize your hypertrophy with just concentric, you can do that. If you, for whatever reason, choose to do that. If you do it with just eccentric, you can do that as well. Now, the reality is, for beginners, especially, it's good to do both. Beginners shouldn't get too caught up in a bunch of negative training. A negative, for example, would be like if I'm on the bench press, right? And I'm just, let's say I'm controlling it going down slow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I have my friend help me get all the way up and go again. 1, 2. That can be very useful for a variety of different reasons. It can help you maybe with improving your bench press as a whole. It can help you with different aspects of hypertrophy, but it's beginners need to just work on going through the full range of motion, mainly because of the fact that oftentimes they aren't strong enough or don't have the stability needed to be doing, eccentric reps. And with the weight that they can manage to do it with isn't sufficient enough to where if you're gonna be like, let's say you're a beginner and you can only really work with 135 on bench press for reps, well, just going down slow like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, isn't gonna benefit you as much as maybe me doing that with, say, 315 pounds. So in that case, you might as well just get the full benefit of going all the way down, all the way up, going through the full range of motion. So beginners need to keep that in mind. Now, with that being said, I gotta work on saying that so much, but the point is, guys, it's overall, you're gonna get more bang for your buck doing both, for the mere fact that you're doing more total work. The reason that people put a lot of emphasis on the eccentric, once again, you look at all these different bodybuilders out here, they're coming up and they're going down nice and slow, boom, boom, boom. But as I said, once again, guys, when you're enhanced, anything you do is gonna work. I can do anything involving my muscles and make it seem like it's stimulating all this extra growth and hypertrophy, when really it's just the drugs that person is on. So, big takeaway from this, 99% of you should be doing both concentric and eccentric. Now, there are certain movements where you may only do one or the other. For example, the deadlift. As you start to get to heavier weights, as I explained in my deadlift, full deadlift tutorial and breakdown video, as you get heavier in weight, it becomes really dangerous trying to do a slow, controlled eccentric with that much weight. When you got 400, 500, 600 pounds, that's why you see like a lot of people, when they come up, they either just drop it, or when they come down, like when we have to do in powerlifting competitions, we keep our hands on it and we have some form of control, but we come down quickly. Why? Because it's dangerous. For one, the eccentric portion is you're more susceptible to injury on that with the deadlift than the concentric portion. While with the concentric portion, everything's nice and tight. You're coming up, you're being exposed to the eccentric. You're having to like be nice, slow, control it. And when you're doing that with 400 or 500 pounds of weight, that can put you in a great risk for injury, especially in your lower back region. Not to mention the fact that it's going to tax your recovery more, because that's another thing a lot of people understand. The eccentric portion of the lift taxes your recovery more than the concentric portion of the lift. Why? Well, because once again, this nice, fast, and explosive. This, we have a little bit more control. Lowering that weight as going and like trying to like, you know, control against gravity is simply going to tax your overall recovery more so, especially with something heavy like the deadlift. So that's why a lot of people just cut that out by just either just going down quickly or dropping it. A lot of people will say things like, oh, you didn't really complete the lift. And in powerlifting, yes, you have to keep your hands on it, but in powerlifting, no judge is expecting you to go down nice like this. No, as long as you come down, hands touching it, boom, you're good to go, because they understand the danger of doing that. And that's why things like Romanian deadlifts come in handy. That's why I always do Romanian deadlifts after Romanian deadlifts, because that's when you can focus on just, you know, a nice controlled eccentric portion of the lift. Because the fact is, you're not going to do anywhere near as much weight with a Romanian deadlift as you are on a conventional or sumo deadlift. So in certain cases like that, yeah, it makes sense to just do concentric or eccentric, but for the most part, you're gonna want to do both of them together. But that's pretty much it, guys. I have nothing more to say about it. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a comment down below, let me know that you did. If you did not, leave a comment down below, let me know what I can do to get better. Like the video, share, subscribe, keep it simple, specific, scientific. I'll catch y'all later.